Chapter 11. On March 23, 1972, Alan went with Dorothy to the recruiting office, and he and Tommy signed the enlistment papers. Dorothy had mixed feelings about letting her younger son join the Navy, but she knew it was important to get him out of the house, away from Chalmer. The expulsion from school had made things worse. The recruiting officer moved quickly through the paperwork and the questions. Dorothy did most of the answering. "Have you ever been in a mental institution or been diagnosed as mentally ill?" "No," Tommy said. "Not me." "Wait just a minute," Dorothy said. "You did spend 3 months in Columbus State Hospital. Dr. Brown said it was hysterical neurosis." The recruiter looked up, pen poised. We don't have to put that down," he said. "Everybody's a little neurotic." Tommy gave Dorothy a triumphant look. When the time came to take the general education and development test, Tommy and Alan both looked it over. Seeing that it had nothing to do with any of Tommy's abilities or knowledge, Alan decided to take the test himself. But then Danny came and looked at the paper, not knowing what to do. The proctor, seeing his confused look, whispered, "Go ahead. Just black in your answers between the little lines." Danny shrugged, and without reading any of the questions, went down the columns and blacked in between the lines. He passed. Within a week, Alan was on his way to the Naval Training Center at Great Lakes, Illinois, and was assigned to Company 109, Battalion 21, to begin his basic training. Because Milligan had been in the Civil Air Patrol when he was in high school, he was appointed RPOC, Recruit Petty Officer in charge of 160 young recruits. He was a strict disciplinarian. When Alan learned that the company most proficient in the 16-count manual would be made the Honor Company, he and Tommy set to work to find where they could whittle minutes off the morning schedule. "Cut out showers," Tommy suggested. "Regulations," Alan said. "They've got to go into the showers even if they don't use soap." Tommy sat down and figured out an assembly line method of showering. The next evening, Alan instructed the men. "You roll up your towel and put it into your left hand. You put your bar of soap into your right. There is 16 showers this way, 12 across and 16 this way. Now they're all even water temperature, so you won't get scalded or froze out. What you do is walk through and keep walking as you wash the left side of your body. When you get to the corner, flip the soap over to your other hand and keep moving, going backwards as you wash the other side of your body and your hair. By the time you get to the end shower, you've rinsed off, ready to dry." The recruits watched in astonishment as he demonstrated by walking through the showers with his uniform on, checking his watch. "This way, it takes only 45 seconds for each one to shower. All 160 of you should be able to get through, out of the shower and dressed in less than 10 minutes. I want us to be the first company out on the grinder in the morning. We're gonna be the Honor Company." Next morning, Milligan's company was the first out on the parade grounds. Alan was pleased, and Tommy told him he was working on a few more time-saving methods. He was awarded the Service Medal for good conduct. 2 weeks later, things started to go bad. Alan called home and found out that Chalmer was beating Dorothy again. Reagan became angry. Arthur, of course, didn't really care, but it bothered Tommy and Danny and Alan a great deal. They became depressed, and it caused another mix-up time. Sean started wearing his shoes on the wrong feet and leaving them untied. David became slovenly. Philip found out where he was and didn't give a damn. The men of Company 109 soon realized there was something wrong with their RPOC. One day he would be a crack leader, and the next day he would sit around talking and letting the paperwork pile up. They observed that he began walking in his sleep. Someone told him about it, and Tommy started tying himself to the bed at night. When he was relieved of the RPOC job, Tommy became depressed, and Danny went to sick bay whenever he could. Arthur became interested in the hematology lab. The Navy sent an investigator to observe him one day. He found Philip stretched out on his bunk in uniform, his white hat on his feet, flipping cards off the top of the deck. "What's going on here?" Captain Simmons demanded. "Get on your feet, mister," said his aide. "Fuck off," Philip said. "I'm a captain. How dare you?" "I don't give a damn if you're Jesus Christ. Get out of here. You're making me miss." When Chief Petty Officer Rankin came in, Philip told him the same thing. On April 12, 1972, 2 weeks and 4 days after Tommy joined the Navy, Philip was assigned to the Recruit Evaluation Unit. The report from his company commander stated, "This man was my RPOC at first, but then he didn't do anything except try to boss everyone all the time. Then he started going to sick call after I relieved him of his RPOC job. Each day it got worse. In every class he found a reason to get out of it. This man is way behind the rest of the company and is going downhill all the time. This man will require watching." A psychiatrist interviewed David, who didn't understand what was going on. After a check of the records from Ohio, the Navy discovered that he had been in a mental hospital and had lied on the recruitment papers. The psychiatric report stated, "He lacks the necessary maturity and stability to function effectively in the Navy. It is recommended that he be discharged as temperamentally unsuitable for further training." On May 1st, a month and a day after his enlistment, William Stanley Milligan was discharged from the U.S. Navy under honorable conditions. He was given his pay and an airline ticket to Columbus, but on the way from Great Lakes to O'Hare Airport in Chicago, Philip learned that 2 other recruits on leave to go home were heading for New York City. Instead of using his United Airline ticket, Philip joined them on the bus. He was going to see New York, the place he knew he was from but had never seen. At the New York bus terminal, Philip said goodbye to his traveling companions, slung his duffel bag over his shoulder, and started walking. He picked up maps and brochures at the information desk and headed for Times Square. He felt at home. The streets, the voices that sounded natural to his ear, assured him that this was where he belonged. Philip spent 2 days exploring the city. He took a trip on the Staten Island ferry and one to the Statue of Liberty. Then, starting at the Battery, he wandered the narrow streets around Wall Street and walked up to Greenwich Village. He ate in a Greek restaurant and slept at a cheap hotel. The next day he went to 5th Avenue and 34th Street and stared up at the Empire State Building. He took the tour to the top and studied the city. "Which way is Brooklyn?" he asked the tour guide. She pointed. "Over there. You can see the 3 bridges, the Williamsburg, the Manhattan, and the Brooklyn Bridge. That's where I'm going next," he said. He took the elevator down, hailed a cab, and said, "Take me to the Brooklyn Bridge." "The Brooklyn Bridge?" Philip flung his duffel bag inside. "That's what I said. You gonna jump off it or buy it?" the driver asked. "Fuck you, dog. Just drive and save the smart-ass jokes for the out-of-towners." The driver let him out at the bridge, and Philip started walking across it. There was a cool breeze and he felt good. But when he reached the halfway point, he stopped and looked down. All that water. God, it was beautiful. Suddenly he felt very depressed. He didn't know why, but in the middle of this beautiful bridge, he felt so down he couldn't go on. He slung his duffel bag over his shoulder and turned back toward Manhattan. His depression grew deeper. Here he was in New York and not having a good time. There was something he had to see, some place he had to find, but he didn't know what or where it was. He got on a bus, took it as far as it went, then transferred to another bus and another, looking at the houses and the people but not knowing where he was going, what he was searching for. He got off at a shopping mall and wandered. In the middle of the mall he saw a wishing fountain. He flipped a couple of coins. As he started to toss a 3rd quarter in, he felt a tugging at his sleeve. A little black boy was looking up at him with big pleading eyes. "Oh shit," Philip said, flipping him the coin. The boy grinned and ran. Philip picked up the duffel bag. Depression began to eat at his gut with such a feeling of pain that he stood there for a few moments, shuddered, and left the spot. David staggered under the weight of the duffel bag and dropped it. That was too heavy for an 8-year-old, almost 9, to carry. He dragged it along behind him, looking at the store windows, wondering where he was and how he had gotten here. He sat down on a bench, looked around, and watched children playing. He wished he could play with them. Then he got up and started pulling the duffel bag again, but it was too heavy, so he just left it and wandered off. He went into an Army and Navy store and looked at the surplus CBs and sirens. He picked up a big plastic bubble and pressed a switch. The siren went off and the red light inside started flashing. Terrified, he dropped the bubble and ran, knocking over an ice cream vendor's bicycle parked outside and scraping his elbow. He kept running. When he saw no one coming after him, David stopped running and walked the streets, wondering how he was going to get back to the house. Dorothy was probably worried about him. He was getting hungry. He wished he had an ice cream. If he could find a policeman, he would ask him how to get home. Arthur always said if he was lost, he should ask the Bobbies to help him. Alan blinked his eyes. He bought an ice cream on a stick from a vendor and started off unwrapping it. But then he saw a little dirty-faced girl watching him. "Jesus Christ," he said, handing it to her. He was a sucker for kids, especially those with big hungry eyes. He went back to the vendor. "Give me another one." "Boy, you must be hungry." "Shut up and give me the ice cream." As he walked eating his ice cream, he decided he had to do something about letting kids get to him. What kind of con artist lets kids make a sucker of him? He wandered around, looking at the big buildings of what he thought was Chicago, and then took a bus downtown. He knew it was too late to get down to O'Hare Airport tonight. He'd have to spend the night here in Chicago and take the plane to Columbus in the morning. Suddenly, he saw an electronic sign on a building that flashed. May 5th, temperature 68 degrees. May 5th? He pulled out his wallet and looked through it. About $500 separation pay. His discharge was dated May 1st. His plane ticket from Chicago to Columbus was dated May 1st. What the hell? Here, he'd been wandering around in Chicago for 4 days since his discharge without knowing it. Where was his duffel bag? He had an empty feeling in his stomach. He looked down at his dress blue uniform. It was filthy. The elbows were ripped and his left arm was scrapped. All right, he'd get something to eat, get a night's sleep, and take the flight back to Columbus in the morning. He grabbed a couple of hamburgers, found a flop house and spent $9 for a room. The next morning he hailed a cab and told the driver to take him to the airport. LaGuardia? He shook his head. He didn't know there was a LaGuardia in Chicago. Nah, the other one, the big one. All during the trip to the airport he tried to understand what had happened. He closed his eyes and tried to reach Arthur. Nothing. Reagan? Nowhere around. So it was another mix-up time. At the airport he went up to the United Airlines counter and handed the clerk his ticket. "Where can I get out of here?" he asked. She looked at the ticket and then at him. "This is for a flight from Chicago to Columbus. You can't go from here to Ohio on this." "What are you talking about?" "Chicago," she said. "Yeah? So?" The supervisor came over and examined the ticket. Alan didn't understand what the problem was. "You all right, sailor?" the man said. "You can't fly from New York to Columbus on this." Alan rubbed his unshaven face. "New York?" "That's right, Kennedy Airport." "Oh, God." Alan took a deep breath and started talking fast. "Well, look, what happened is somebody made a mistake. You see, I've been discharged. He pulled out his papers. I got on the wrong plane, you see, and it was supposed to take me to Columbus. Somebody must have slipped something in my coffee because I was unconscious, and when I came to, I was here in New York. Left my bags on the plane and everything. You'll have to do something about it. It's the airline's fault. It's going to cost you a surcharge to change this ticket, the woman said. Well, you just call the Navy in Great Lakes. They are the ones who have got to get me back to Columbus. You just bill them for it. I mean, a serviceman on his way home has a right to be given proper transportation without going through a hassle. You just pick up that phone and call the Navy. The man looked at him and then said, Okay, why don't you just wait here and I'll see what we can do for a serviceman. Where is the man's room? Alan asked. She pointed and Alan walked to it quickly. Once inside, seeing there was no one else there, he grabbed a loose roll of toilet paper off the ledge and flung it across the room. Shit! 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 He shouted. God damn it! I can't take any more of this shit. When he settled down, he washed his face, brushed his hair back, and put his white cap on at a jaunty angle to face the people at the ticket counter. During the flight back to Columbus, Alan mulled over his annoyance at having been in New York for 5 days without seeing any of it except the inside of a taxi in Kennedy International Airport. He had no idea how he had gotten there, who had stolen the time, or what had happened. He wondered if he would ever find out. On the bus to Lancaster, he settled back for a nap and mumbled, hoping Arthur or Reagan would hear it. Somebody sure screwed up. Alan got a job selling vacuum cleaners and trash compactors door to door for Interstate Engineering. Fast-talking Alan did well for about a month. He observed his co-worker Sam Garrison making dates with waitresses and secretaries as well as customers. Alan admired his hustle. On the 4th of July 1972, Garrison asked, as they sat talking, How come you don't date some of these chicks? I don't have time, Alan said. He squirmed, always uncomfortable when the conversation turned to sex. I'm not really that interested. You're not queer, are you? Hell no. 17 and you're not interested in girls? Look, Alan said, I've got other things in my mind. For God's sake, Garrison said, haven't you ever been laid? I don't want to talk about it. Unaware of Philip's experience with a girl in the psychiatric hospital, Alan felt his face go red and he turned away. You don't mean to tell me you're a virgin? Alan said nothing. Well, my boy, Garrison said, we'll have to do something about that. Leave it to Sam. I'll pick you up at your house tonight at 7 o'clock. That evening, Alan showered, dressed up, and used some of Billy's brother's cologne. Jim was in the Air Force now and wouldn't miss it. Garrison arrived on time and drove him up to town. They pulled up in front of the hot spot on Broad Street and Garrison said, Wait in the car. I'll be right out with something. Alan was startled when Garrison returned a few minutes later with 2 bored-looking young women. Hi, honey, the blonde said, leaning into the car window. I'm Dina, and this is Dolly. You're a good-looking guy. Dolly flipped her long black hair back and got into the front of the car with Garrison. Trina got in the back with Alan. They drove out into the country, talking and giggling all the way. Trina kept putting her hand on Alan's leg and playing with his fly zipper. When they got to a deserted spot, Garrison pulled off the road. Come on, Billy, he said. I got blankets in the trunk. Help me get them out. As Alan walked to the trunk with him, Garrison handed him 2 thin tinfoil wrapped packages. You know what to do with this, don't you? Yeah, Alan said. But I don't need to put 2 on, do I? Garrison pushed his arm gently. Always the comedian. One is for Trina, and the other one's for Dolly. I told them we'd switch. We'll each fuck 'em both. Alan looked down into the trunk and saw a hunting rifle. He looked up quickly, but Sam handed him a blanket, took one for himself, and shut the trunk. Then he and Dolly walked off behind a tree. "Come on, we'd better get started," Trina said, unbuckling Alan's belt. "Hey, you don't have to do that," Alan said. "Well, if you're not interested, honey." A short time later, Sam called for Trina and Dolly came over to Alan. "Well?" asked Dolly. "Well, what? Can you make it again?" "Look," Alan said, "like I told your friend over there, you don't have to do anything and we can still be friends." "Well, honey, you can do anything you want, but I don't want Sam to get mad. You're a pretty nice guy. He's kind of busy with Trina, so I guess he won't notice." When Sam was done, he went to the trunk, pulled a couple of beers out of the cooler, and handed one to Alan. "Well," he said, "how'd you like the girls?" "I didn't do anything, Sam." "You mean you didn't do anything?" "They didn't do anything. I told them they didn't have to. When I'm ready, I'll get married." "Shit." "That's okay. Take it easy," Alan said. "Everything's cool." "Cool crap." He stormed over to the girls. "I told you this guy was a virgin. It was up to you two to turn him on." Dolly walked to the back of the car where Garrison was standing and saw the rifle in the trunk. "You're in trouble, buddy." "Shit, get in the car," Garrison said. "We'll take you back." "Not getting in the car." "Well, then fuck you." Garrison slammed the trunk shut and jumped behind the wheel. "Come on, Billy, let the goddamn bitches walk." "Why don't you get in?" Alan asked them. "You don't want to stay out here alone." "We'll get back okay," Trina said. "But you guys are gonna pay for this." Garrison gunned the motor and Alan got into the car. "We shouldn't leave them here alone." "Shit, just a couple of crummy broads." "It wasn't their fault. I didn't want it." "Well, at least it didn't cost us nothing." 4 days later, on July 8, 1972, Sam Garrison and Alan went to the sheriff's office in Circleville to answer some questions. Both were immediately arrested for kidnapping, rape, and assault with a deadly weapon. When the judge in Pickaway County heard the facts as pre-trial, he dismissed the charge of kidnapping and set a bond of $2,000. Dorothy raised $200 for the bondsman's fee and took her son back home. Chalmer argued to have him sent back to jail, but Dorothy arranged with her sister to take Billy into her home in Miami, Florida, until his October hearing before the Pickaway County Juvenile Court. With Billy and Jim away, the girls began to work on Dorothy. Katie and Chala gave her an ultimatum. If she didn't start divorce proceedings against Chalmer, they were both going to leave home. Dorothy finally agreed that Chalmer had to go. In Florida, Alan went to school and did well. He got a job at a paint supply store and impressed the owner with his organizational ability. Samuel, the religious Jew, learned Billy's father had been Jewish. Along with many of the other Jewish residents in Miami, he was outraged at the killing of the 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympic Village. Samuel went to Friday night services to pray for their souls and the soul of Billy's father. He also asked God to have the court find Alan innocent. When he came back to Pickaway County on October 20th, Milligan was turned over to the Ohio Youth Commission for evaluation. He was held in the Pickaway County Jail from November 1972 to February 16, 1973, 2 days after his 18th birthday. Though he had turned 18 while in custody, the judge agreed that he should be tried as a juvenile. His mother's attorney, George Kellner, told the judge that in his view, whatever the decision of the court, it was imperative that this young man not be sent back to his destructive home environments. The judge handed down a verdict of guilty and ordered William S. Milligan sent to an Ohio Youth Commission facility for an indefinite period. On March 12th, the same day Alan was transported to the youth camp in Zanesville, Ohio, Dorothy's divorce decree from Chalmer Milligan became final. Reagan mocked Samuel and told him there was no God.